Welcome back to the Frontstack series. In the previous videos, we've seen how we can set up a complete online store with features such as routing and searching and cards and kind of individualizing your look and feel, all using AI-assisted coding. And in this video, we want to have a bit more of a look behind the scenes, understand how it works, how Frontstack works more specifically, and how we connect the dots and everything. Before we go into the depths of that, I want to wrap off the practical part with one more in-depth example that kind of acts as a bridge between what we were doing in the previous videos and what we're going to do in this video, especially in the second part of this video. So I hope you stick around and enjoy. So far, we've built a fully functional online shop UI with navigation, with a search, and I've executed some more prompts to just kind of fill in some of the gaps and round it off properly. But what I want to go into in this part is actually extending the search result page through a very common thing that you find in online shops, which is filters. You want users to be able to narrow down the results so they can find what they are looking for specifically. So let's head into our search and search for a product. So now we will actually get a result of all products, well, that match the search term that we are looking for. So in order to improve that, let's head to Cursor and ask it to add some filters. I would like you to add a filter section on the search result page. I would like it to be displayed on the left side of the page. Every filter should be a collapsible segment, sort of like an accordion. I also want the filter options to be selectable individually. So kind of like a checkbox or something would be cool, but please have it in a stylized way, maybe with like a black background when it's selected and just a box with a black border when it's not selected. Please also show how many options are selected for each filter and add a reset filter button. So we can see it's creating a new filter component that is going to place the filters inside probably. So you can see it's doing a bit of forth and back with the type checks and the letter errors right here. But let's just have a quick look at the, well, actually now it's done. So let's have a quick look at the resulting layout. Okay, so we do have filters. We can expand them, which is pretty cool. Let's try the color filter. Okay, apparently we are able to filter. However, it's not showing us the state of the filter properly, but generally this is working. And what you can see here is that we have a couple filters that don't have proper names. That's more of a data issue. If we had the correct mappings defined, we would be able to show them right here. But yeah, I mean, generally we have filters showing up. They seem to be usable. However, let's try to fix that one issue that you can't actually see the filter state. Okay, this is working so far. However, I don't really like the look and feel of the filter box. Could you make it a bit more minimalistic? Please just maybe have horizontal separators, but leave out the borders around. And the second thing is, I can't see whether a filter is already selected or not. It always shows as an empty checkbox, even after I click it. So it's already made some changes to the design. Okay, this is definitely looking better. So it definitely has filters pink and black selected, however it's not showing the status. So it kind of probably picked up on the wrong thing. I was picking up on the filters being expanded but not selected. Maybe I need to be more specific with my prompt. What I meant was that I can't see which filter option is selected. So the filter expansion and everything works, but say I select a specific color, the listing updates and filters down the results correctly. However, there's no indication that the filter option is selected. Interesting approach. Nope, this is still not working. Okay, this is still not working. Please just replace the current implementation with a simple checkbox input. I think the issue here is that it's depending on a Tailwind specific class, which is probably not installed or initiated properly in the Tailwind configuration. So it's a display issue. But yeah, this is kind of the stage where you have to work with more specific cursor rules or better examples. Now we actually have a more simple layout of the filter options, but we can actually now see which ones have been selected and everything seems to be working pretty nicely. If you've built e-commerce websites before and you've been working with filters, then you know that this can be one of the more tedious parts of building your project. So this just goes to show that things actually become way easier when you have a clear definition of the API, like Frontstack gives it to you, and then you combine it with the powers of an AI model and then the definition of the API. It can become really easy and very, very straightforward to do the first step of the implementation. And then based off this, you can do a lot more things. And here I kind of want to build a bridge to Frontstack because it is super easy to add new filters as well. What you can see here is the Frontstack administration interface. We can use this product search block, which is the one that the UI is constantly calling to refresh the list of products here. And here we can actually open the product search block and head to the query section. And in here we can go to this listing options container. And as we open those listing settings here, we see that all the available filters that we have, that we're seeing in the UI, are actually selected here. Now I can go ahead and select another one. I have actually prepared one, which is the is backpack flag. That's just a simple yes, no filter, just for the purpose of demonstrating how this works. And then I can apply this. I apply the changes. Now my block has been updated, which means my API has been updated, basically. I can then go back to my editor and just let it know about my change. I've just added another filter, is backpack, in the Frontstack admin panel. Could you please add that as well? Well, it appears that it didn't see any changes were necessary. Let's see. Oh, we actually have the is backpack filter showing up here. Let's see if it works. Okay. We definitely get some products. Let's check this one. We get a different result of products. I might have set up the filter in the wrong way because those are definitely not backpacks. But that might be a data setup issue. It's more for showing that actually those filters propagate through all the way to the front end, and then they actually also show up here. And yeah, I can also reset the filters. And I think that this shows you kind of the end-to-end connection between making a change in Frontstack and then seeing it propagate all the way through to the front end. I guess the next step that we could do would obviously be creating a mapping between those more technical identifiers of the filters and the actual name or label that we want to have it show up here. So now, after this very practical approach of showing how Frontstack can be used together with AI models and kind of improve your workflow tools like Cursor, I want to zoom out a little bit and show what exactly Frontstack is doing that enables that sort of workflow, because so far it's remained kind of a black box, and I think it's just a very interesting, very powerful approach, and I kind of want to bring that closer to you. Frontstack applies a so-called, or what we call, design-first approach when it comes to building e-commerce frontends. And what we mean by that is that we kind of try to turn the whole process of building a project on its head, whereas normally you would start with defining your data and your backends and then integrating them all together, finding your processes, and then in the end you're trying to put everything together in a user interface. We kind of try to turn it inside out, where we start with a UI or with a user experience that defines how your website should look and feel and behave. And then based on that, you go ahead and you define the structure of your content. You define what pages look like, you define what kind of fields and data products are made up of, what kind of filters you might have, and how images are organized and whatnot. So you kind of break down the data structure of the page based on the design, based on the UX draft that you start with. And then you start building a front-end application. You use that data to generate a client SDK, and then you use that, or you let the machine learning model use that to build your front end. And we think this is a way leaner approach that really sets the front end development free and does not bind it or make it so dependent on the limitations or the restrictions of the backends, of the data integrations, of the middlewares, where things tend to take longer because there are oftentimes more intricate processes involved with these. So we think by following this design-first approach, we just allow front-end developers to be way more quick, try out things, rely on a safe and fast API, and also just focus on what they're supposed to do, which is building front-ends and building user experiences. So really at the heart of Frontstack lies its API builder, and the API builder allows users to create views or API endpoints of their data that can then be consumed by the frontends. So you have blocks which are really views on individual pieces or units of data, like a single product or a single category or a single image, for example. And then you have listings, where a listing basically allows you to have lists of blocks and gives you the ability to filter them, sort them, search through them, and so on. We've just done that earlier when we had the product search listing, and we were able to actually set some options here. For example, we were able to add new filters, but in the same fashion, we could add fields that could be searched through or sorted by, and so on. Also, listings have a schema. The schema usually contains a block, which is the base for the listing, for the items that are displayed in the listing. And then you have some other things like aggregations and filters, depending on what has been configured. And in the same way, blocks themselves also have a schema. As you can see here, we have different fields that kind of define how the resulting API payload will look like, and then you will receive that in your front. Next to listings and blocks, we have pages in Frontstack. Pages really try to solve the challenge around routing and having a URL or a path that needs to be resolved to some sort of data that you can display on the page without knowing exactly what it is. You never know whether it's going to be a product detail page or whether you're actually going to display a category page. Pages are complete views, and you can see right here that they reference a block themselves. So every page has its embedded block, and at the same time they have a slug which defines how to map from the URL to the corresponding block that is underlying. They take care of error handling, of falling back, of translations, and of URLs that have been deleted, making sure that they redirect afterwards, and so on. So all this is solved in such a way that you as a developer don't really have to think about this. With all these concepts in mind, I quickly want to show how from right here we actually translate into your developer environment, because this is where most of the magic actually happens. Okay, so now we're back in the IDE, and now I want to show how you connect your local project to your Frontstack admin. In order to do this, we use the Frontstack CLI. The Frontstack CLI has been used in that project already by the AI model, because based on the cursor rules, it knows exactly which commands to call. But just to give you an idea of how to connect the dots, we're gonna do this manually now. I can run npx frontstack dev /CLI /generate, which is gonna generate the client on my local system. Now this will first log me in on the Frontstack website. I can close this again and go back here. Now it's asking me to select from my projects. Right now I just have one project set up, so I'm going to use this one. And now it's giving me confirmation that it has actually generated my client. We cannot see any changes within the repository. So if I say git status, okay, well, nothing's happened. So let's just go ahead and make a change here, okay? So let's say we use this blog and we actually want to change something with the product card. Let's say we want to add another field right here. Long description. Okay, we're going to map this just to the description field that we have right now. Don't really need to bother what this means specifically. I can just save it now, apply the changes. And now if I regenerate my client, I can actually see that there have been changes. And if I look at those changes, I can see that the schema has actually been changed, and we have this long description now inside of our API definition. And now I can actually go into my product card component that is using the exact type that we just changed. And thanks to the full type completion of this, I can go here and now actually get instant completion for the field that I've created. This is the whole magic behind this client. So if we were actually to, let's go to a different component, let's go to this one. You can here see that this is using the client actually, and let's just see what we're able to do with the client. We can say client dot, and we have all the methods that reflect the schemas inside of the admin panel. So we have a way to fetch blocks, for example. We can pass the name of the block right here. We can do the same thing for listings. For example, the product search, and then in here we can pass additional parameters if there are some. The product search doesn't have parameters, but for example the category list probably has category ID parameter that we can pass, but let's just stick with a product search. Right here we can pass as a second parameter query information. So for example, we can pass filters or paginations or sortings and so on and so forth. And also the typing goes all the way to here. So for example, here we can now have name and price amount as our sorting parameters. If we were to go back to the admin panel, we can just go ahead here and add another field for sorting. For example, we want to be able to sort by is backpack. Let's just stick to this and apply this change, apply it here. And then we just give the client a very quick regenerate. Once that's done, we will actually be able to also select is backpack right here. And this is how you get a super close end-to-end integration from your front end and your API. And at the same time, and this is super cool, the API is completely decoupled from the backend. So we haven't really talked about how to actually get data from your backend or from your multiple backends into your API, and then obviously subsequently into the front. So let's switch into that now. So normally when building a front end with a framework like React or Vue.js, what you do is you have a assortment of backend services that you somehow need to integrate with the front end. Then that naturally leads to you building connections between the front end and all the backend services. Sometimes you might have a custom built middleware in between that kind of abstracts things away and gives your front end a GraphQL API or something like that. But in the end, you still have to juggle all these APIs and make sure your front end stays in sync with them and the changes and everything. You basically have N dependencies, one for each API. And the way that Frontstack is solving that problem is by sitting in between of your front end and those services in the backend, and it gives your front end a single source of truth that defines how data comes in and out. And you can already see how the front end is not very aware of the services that it is talking to on the backend side. And this is one of the very big advantages that we have, that the front end developer does not really need to know or even worry about where the data is coming from, because all that's abstracted away for them for the sake of a better and more efficient workflow. And then Frontstack itself connects to those services, makes sure that the data is kept up to date, makes sure it properly understands the structure of each of those source systems, and it integrates well with them, and also makes sure to stay in sync with the latest API versions, and just generally makes sure that things run stable and the front end is always talking to a available and fast API. Frontstack does or realizes those sorts of integrations by means of, well, integrations, literally. That's what they're called in Frontstack. Right here you can see that we have different services connected to Frontstack that feed data into the system. If I wanted to, I could also add other integrations. You can see that there are integrations with a couple of systems. There's not every single integration shown on this screen, but basically the idea is you just select that integration, you set up your integration credentials, you map a couple of things, and then you basically have a setup that feeds data into your system. And if I was to close this and actually look into how one of those integrations works, you can look at the shopware integration right here. An integration provides multiple data feeds. For example, this one provides products as well as categories. And if we go in here, we can see that we have a so-called data feed, and that data feed just notifies us about any changes. We have this endpoint right here that kind of receives the changes and allows the backend to trigger changes into our system, and it also automatically infers the schema of the data that is coming in. Okay, so this is, for example, the typical schema of a product coming from a shopware instance. We could also upload a piece of sample data and then let Frontstack infer the structure from that schema. And what we can also do is browse the most recent records that have actually been fed into Frontstack, and then just use those to infer the schema. And that way we can basically make sure that data gets into the system. There are a couple more steps involved with this, which I can very briefly show you. We have this data sync step that basically merges the payload that is coming through the API into our internal system, which is called storages. And the storages are basically views on your data that are used to then build the API endpoints, the blocks and the listings from. So you have the configurations here that kind of map the fields onto each other. You can here see how that works without going any deeper into it. Basically just map our internal structure to the structure that is coming in. And then in your data storage, you can actually see all the data that's normalized and fed into Frontstack with a end-to-end integration path from your source system all the way to the specific place where it's being used in the front end, making sure you have end-to-end type safety and end-to-end validations of the data and the transformation that it goes through. So to start and wrap things up, why do we think all of this does matter? I think first of all, it is quite easy to see how you get more development efficiency from building front ends in that way. First of all, using the AI tools, but then also using a tool like Frontstack that provides you an end-to-end integration path. You just have to worry about less things because a lot of things are already solved for you, such as routing, such as indexing or type safety and auto completion and whatnot. So this is all kind of built in a way that also allows a AI first development workflow, which we definitely see the future is going to be. On the other hand, when you think about building front ends that integrate with multiple backend systems, ultimately your front end is always going to be as slow as the slowest API that it's talking to, unless you have some sort of abstraction layers in between. Frontstack really tries to take that challenge and turn it into one of the benefits by making sure that product data is as up-to-date as possible, but definitely as available and as responsive as possible. So we really focus on providing sub 100 millisecond load times for products and even for product listings and searches, because ultimately those fractions of a second just make a big difference when it comes to customers liking the look and feel, converting into actually customers that want to buy the products. And we think that really makes a difference, and Frontstack focuses on that. Ultimately, it is a very future-proof way of building projects. It allows you to, first of all, make sure your front end is dictating in which direction the whole project is going to develop into, because you don't really need to think about anything else. And then you ultimately think about, okay, how can I deliver the best customer experience? If this is what you can spend your time doing, you've won a lot of benefits through that. And also, if in the background services change, say you want to use something else for reviews, or you want to use a different service for tracking or for order management or whatnot, you can switch those out in the background. We haven't really talked about releases and version management, even though that is built into Frontstack. And those things really allow you to make changes in the API, but even more than that, make changes behind the API so that the front end doesn't even notice anything about it, even though maybe some of your backend processes really heavily depend on it. And we just think this allows a really exciting and efficient new way of working. And I really hope this video and this series kind of showed you what it's capable of. And if you want to try it out, head to our website and definitely check it out.